Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode. Project Fairlady. We've got a lot to get through today, guys, so let's get into it. This is the vacuum purge line that goes from the fuel tank to the evap canister in the engine bay. It's not in bad condition. It's a little bit sort of pocky here and there. You know, the sort of clear casing coating that they have on it has started to break down a little bit, but the line itself is actually still in really good condition, other than it's just a little bit ugly. So rather than paint this, which you can do, but you need to paint it in something that's pretty decent quality. And this sort of plastic coating that they have on them can be a bit of a problem when you paint them. It can sort of fry up on the edges where it's kind of broken through a bit. It's yeah, like I say, it is paintable, but it's a little problematic. Or you can do what I've done here. And what I've done here is I've slid heat shrink over it and then shrunk it up, and it gives it a nice plasticky, rubbery kind of a finish on there that goes nice and tight and is quite resilient to scuffs and abrasions and things like that. I've only done that section at the moment. I am going to do the whole lot. That's where it clamps on the end, but you can see it's quite a good solution to pipe work like this that's starting to show a little bit of age, but is actually still in pretty good condition. The biggest issue is if you try and do it with brake lines and you've got a fitting on the end, you really have to use a heat shrink that's going to shrink a lot more. Say, you know, a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 sort of a heat shrink that'll actually go over the fitting and still shrink down properly on the pipe. I think the one I'm using here is like a 2-to-1. So it only shrinks to sort of half its size, which is okay if you've got no fitting to get on the end. It'll still sort of shrink down nice and tight. But there you go. Trevor's tip of the day. Thank you. This is something I briefly touched on earlier, guys, probably in another video. This is my passenger side left-hand front brake line that runs from a connector on the front chassis rail and then up and out to the left-hand front wheel. Now, I mentioned that I was going to replace this because of cosmetic issues with the line. At that stage, I thought I was going to be able to get one from Nissan. It was only going to cost me like $30 or something. And I thought, I'll do that rather than even bother making up a new one or even fixing this one. But it turns out that this particular line's no longer available from Nissan. So it's either repair this or make up a new one. I do keep brake line and bits and pieces here in the Aussie Shed, and I have made up plenty of brake lines before. That's not the issue, but it's quite a complex little thing with lots of bends in it, and realistically there is actually nothing wrong with it other than it had a little bit of surface rust in places where the coating had chipped away on the outside. Nothing major, only all sort of very light, and I thought, I could repaint it, but they're a bit of a pain in the bum to repaint. I've already repainted all the other brake lines on the car, and it was a real pain in the ass to do. So at that stage, the easiest thing to do was to replace it. Like I say, no longer the case. So I thought, well, I'll just fix this one. So what I've done is I've just rubbed it down with a bit of sandpaper, and I've put a couple of coats of epoxy black on it to give it protection. And what I'm going to do now is the same as what I've done to some of the other lines. Is I'm going to put some heat shrink over the top of it. The issue with this brake line is that it has a fitting on the end of it, so we need some heat shrink that's going to go over that fitting there, but still shrink down tight onto here. So here I have some 4-to-1 heat shrink, so it shrinks down to a quarter of its size that it is now. So this will slip over that fitting and still shrink down tight. Now this is a glued heat shrink. So it's lined on the inside with a glue that melts as you shrink the stuff down. So it will actually bond itself to the outside of that and completely seal it all in. So I'm going to do this right through up to where it goes back through the front of the inner guard there, through out into the wheel well. And this first section of it will have some heat protection over the top of this again. So what I'm about to do, lay the heat shrink onto this and get it shrunk down, which I will do just with a heat gun. With one of these guys, or use whatever you want. Oh, crap everywhere. I've got so many little jobs going on at the moment with the Fairlady, guys. I've got shit all over the bench. This is actually the wiring connector for the back of the ignition key switch on the car. You can see these are the wires that I've sort of cut off it. This is where it had an alarm system hooked into the car, plus it had been hacked up for many other things. So I've depinned the connector. I'm now pulling these out and I'm going to rewire from here back to where the wiring loom had been hacked into, just to replace all of this, because you don't want all of this crap on your wiring loom. But yeah, lots of little projects going on, guys. Anyway, I'll get this on and I'll get it heat shrunk and I'll give you a look at it when it's done. That's the heat shrink loaded on. Ready to go, almost to the end, just got enough room to sort of frig around with this thing, and I'll get this shrunk down. So I'm roughly at the halfway mark there, guys. You can see all looks very nice. There's our end fitting. See the glue kind of oozing out around there, and we have this nicely heat shrunk brake line. And so now it's got this thick plasticky rubbery coating on it, which will actually give it a bit of protection, and will certainly give it a bit of cosmetic protection, and it certainly dresses it up nicely. And as you can see, then we move into where it's not heat shrunk, but it's a relatively straightforward sort of a process, and something that I think is a really good thing. All right, I'll carry on until it's done. Done. There we have it. Engine bay brake line. Fully sorted, other than a bit of heat protection. Okie doke. So after getting the AC unit assembled back in the vehicle so that I can run the main engine bay wiring loom in, I've now started to do a bit of work on the AC piping, or the AC lines. They were in very poor condition, and I've been cleaning them all up. I've got them on the bench. Let's go and have a look at them. So these are the two lines, guys, that run from those two connections on the firewall and run down the chassis rail, then to the engine and the chassis respectively. Now these are in very poor condition. I'll insert a bit of a picture that I took of what these look like when they came off the vehicle, guys. You'll be quite shocked at what they look like. Right, now that you've seen that, you can tell that I've done quite a bit of work on these. So I've just been gone over all this piping with sandpaper. First, just some I don't know, maybe 180, 240 sandpaper. Cleaned and scraped all the crap off them. Actually, before that, I'd probably hit them with some thinners and some wax and grease remover, and follow that up with some sandpaper, and then I finished them all off with some green Scotch-Brite, just to give them that sort of satin brush look that I've been doing to a lot of the aluminium. And now that they're all nice and clean like this, all the fittings as well on the ends, I've spent a lot of time cleaning up all the fittings and all the threads and all that sort of stuff. They're now ready to see what attention they need, and this one in particular needs some heat shielding done. There was a wrap around this, and I'm fairly sure it has a wrap from the factory, because this section here is right next to the downpipe and then the exhaust manifold on the passenger side there. So what I'm going to do is rewrap this, and this one here from the factory, sorry, they're a bit awkward to bloody handle. It had like a piece of tubing with a little bit of wrap just on this end. But what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to extend that right up that section, and then possibly a little bit of this as well, just because this is still rather exposed to the heat source. The fact that this thing does run a bigger turbo with a bigger exhaust housing on it and larger exhaust manifolds in this area, I think really points to a need to get a bit of heat management on these pipes. So I've dragged out a bit of stuff here I've got plenty of your sort of silicone sleeve stuff. This stuff works really, really good, but the problem with it is it's very hard to slide on over fittings like this, you know, so you end up needing to use wraps. So I've got this fairly light fiberglass backed tape here, which is, I think, is really good as an overwrap over stuff. And I also have this, which is a much better thermal barrier. It's quite a heavy fiberglass with an aluminium backing on it. Both of these are adhesive, and you know, I also have your typical sort of exhaust wrap, rolls your exhaust wrap stuff, which I won't be using. I think that's from memories of that picture that I put up. I think that's what someone had kind of bodged on there, wrapped up with bits of wire and stuff. But what I think I'll use is this stuff here. This is really, really good. This is what I did most of the wiring loom in the Angel Bay that's in the same area with. And it's just, I find this stuff to be really, really good. The only issue with this is the adhesive isn't that good on it. So where you finish it, what I've been doing is sliding some heat shrink over it. And you know, and just sort of heat shrinking the end over it to stop it sort of unraveling, because it's quite neat where it's taped and it's on itself, particularly where you start, you wrap it over itself, so there's no chance of it coming undone there. And if you use like a twin wall, either 3:1 or 4:1 shrink ratio heat shrink, you've got plenty of room to get over your fittings, and then it will shrink down enough to go tight onto things. So that's what I think I'll do with that one. This one here, I'm probably going to slit some silicone tubing and run it over the top of this and then wrap it, because it needs something to space it out off the pipe like this. They've got like a foam on it, which just gives you like sort of an air gap, you know, like which keeps your insulation and everything off the pipe. So it's a fair way under for the heat to get to. So if heat does penetrate through your insulation layer, it then it has to actually go a fair way more before it actually heats the thing that's underneath it. So that's what I'm going to do with this, but it won't be as big. It'll just be like a thin layer, just something to space the heat protection off. Yeah, in this area. And I'll probably start with this in this main area, and I may finish with this. I don't know. I'll think about it as I go. I'll see what it wraps up like, and I guess you guys will see what it looks like when it's done, because honestly it's going to be a real pain in the ass for me to record this while I'm wrapping it, because it's going to be flipping around everywhere. It's a pain in the ass just to show you guys with it wobbling around and bloody getting jammed on everything on the bench. So I'll wrap this up, guys. I'll give you another look at it when it's all done, and see what you reckon. So that's that piece, guys. You can see she's all wrapped now. It came up pretty good. Just put a slit in it, continued it around. So I've got a full wrap around where this valve is with no issues at all. It's not going to come undone there because it's all sort of where I did the slit. It's wrapped over. Continued along down to here. You can see we actually run to there. And then we've got that heat shrink there. Like I say, the stuff is adhesive. It has its own adhesive backing, but I never trust that sort of stuff, you know. Not a real big fan of adhesives on things like this. They, when they get hot, adhesives tend to let go. So when you can, I always try to put a bit of heat shrink over the end of any sort of heat stuff. Once it's out of the main zone where it's going to get hot, a bit of heat shrink will contain it, and you will never, ever have to deal with it again. You can obviously put, you know, a cable tie or a bit of lock wire or a bit of whatever around there, but it always looks like crap, and you end up, you know, with sharp bits where you've cut the wire off where you've finished it off, mate. Bit of heat shrink. Easy as. Easy as. Anyway, that's that one. I guess I will move on to the next one now. I'll be back. So now onto this small AC line, guys. You can see I've got some silicone tubing here. I think it's about an 8mm ID, which is the perfect size of that piping. You've got to get something that's really well matched so that when you do slit it, it sort of closes up very neatly on the pipe work. So that's I've cut strips off this heat shielding tape there, and I've used that to wrap the silicone tubing up so that none of the slits are coming apart everywhere, so it's sitting nice and neat. And now I'm about to do a full wrap on this. So I think I will wrap the heavier tape from here down to maybe there, which is that dump pipe area, and then I will use this thinner tape to then lock off the end of the heavy tape and then take it all the way up to here. Alright, I'll get that done and I'll give you a bit of a squeezy at it. So that turned out pretty good, guys. You can see I've used the heavier insulation shielding down to about there. Then I've just gone to the silver tape. I've actually wrapped the lighter fiberglass aluminium silver tape right from the top all the way over the thicker stuff, and then all the way back up to here. I've wrapped it around nice and tight, put a bit of heat shrink on, and I've made a liar out of myself, guys. I've actually put a bit of heat shrink on it at the start just because it was real easy to do. Not that I believe that it would ever really be needed, but just for a bit of sort of uniformity. And what I think I'm going to do, because that was so easy to do, is I'm going to put a bit of silicone hose, a bit of split silicone hose on this section here. Then I'm going to wrap from here all the way down to about here. So that's the area where the exhaust manifold on that passenger side is. Admittedly, it's a lot lower down, but as you know, heat does come up, and you know, now it's real easy to do, and I've got rolls of the stuff here. It's not really going to cost me anything, just a little bit of time, and I think it looks pretty trick. So I'm going to just roll up, as I say, all the way down about here, I think, and that should look pretty good. So I'll do that. I'll show you what it all looks like. And there it is, guys, all done now. That small line, you can see, so that's where it travels along, you know, where your exhaust manifold is, dump pipe, etc. I'm sure that's got to help. I probably imagine this line carries, not that I really know that much about AC, but I assume this line carries probably hot stuff back to the condenser on the front, but which is probably why it's not insulated in places from the factory. But I would bet my lefty that it's nowhere near as hot as the exhaust manifold that it runs beside. So putting a bit of heat management on it, I don't think would be a bad thing. So I'm just about ready to fit up a lot of these lines. I think I'll just drag out all the new O-rings to join all the bits back together. I've got a full O-ring kit for this, and we'll get some of these AC lines, the brake line and the evap line that all run in that same area on the passenger side front inner guard up the chassis rail. We might get all those on, eh? Yachty! Right, guys, so this is where I've been working with all these lines, doing lines on the Fairlady. So I'll give you a rundown on what we've got here from bottom to top. So first line down the bottom here, that's our evap line that we heat shrunk it right at the beginning of the video. It's now got a layer of silicon coated fiberglass on it, going all the way back to where the catalytic converter is and along through here. Next, coming up through here, we've got the return line for the fuel system coming out of the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator up there. It's AN6 Teflon braid, and again it has a layer of silicon coated fiberglass sleeving over the top of that. And then the next one up from there is our front left brake line coming through again under the chassis. It's got a layer of silicon coated fiberglass again, and then once we go up here, we go into that line that we were doing on the bench there that you guys would have seen. So it has a coat of black epoxy paint on it first, then it has that really thick 4:1 heat shrink, and then it has a layer of, yes, you guessed it, silicon coated fiberglass sleeving in this worst area up to here on this point, and then up here we go back to our standard wrap over the top of the heat shrink, which goes all the way through to where we go through this penetration for it in the front inner guard there. Now up from there again, this first one here, these are our two AC lines that we did. You can see how they've turned out. They look absolutely fantastic. and they mount all the way. Everything's mounted really solid, as you can see. Original bracketry has been used where possible, and in occasions I've been using stainless rubber line P-clamps in areas where things are a bit custom. I did try to chase up a lot of the original plastic clampy, clippy things for here, but most of them are no longer available. There are a few. I've ordered what I could, but again, there's always aftermarket alternatives that you can use. But overall, guys, you can see it's coming up quite well. And this guy here, that's just the that's just an electrical cable there that comes down for the factory oil pressure sensor, you know. So it's all sort of held back secure, and again, it's all like heat insulated and everything. So that's pretty much this area done. Oh, and above it, I don't know whether you can see that in the viewfinder. Oh yeah, I think you can see that. That's our custom engine bay wiring loom that we made many videos ago, sitting up there ready to go. The only thing that isn't finished here, oh sorry, there's two things that aren't finished here. I have to do the AN8 feed line for the fuel system. There's and the middle hole here is still vacant where that comes through, but that's going to probably come up and then tuck across the firewall. I'll probably use these studs that are sticking out of the firewall here and use them to mount stainless P-clips to run that AN8 line across, so it's ready to pick up a feed on the back of the engine. There's also the O2 sensors, the two wideband O2 sensors that I'm using in combination with the Haltech ECU. They will go probably up and over the firewall here somewhere to keep them away from the heat. And they run through the battery mount bracket. There's a there's a hole in that and a grommet that I've put through there, and then go down through the inner guard under the battery tray and back into the cabin in there and into the ECU. There's also going to be, I think, some heat shielding going on here, some aluminium heat shielding on the firewall, and I'm also actually going to make a heat shield, an aluminium heat shield that goes over the top of this. The factory heat shield, I still have it, or I still have part of it. The car only had part of it fitted, and I've sort of started looking at modifying it to make it kind of fit here, but I think I might just end up building a whole new thing, which isn't really that hard to do, just out of a bit of sheet aluminium, just to kind of cover that as well, because this is such a heat impacted area and there is so many things here, particularly once we get our AN8 fuel feed line going in there. So anyway, guys, that's where it's at with all this sort of stuff at the moment. You can see I've been a very busy boy, and that's about it for the video. So as always, guys, thanks for stopping by the Aussie Shed. Always a bloody pleasure to have you here. I hope you're enjoying Project Fairlady. There's still so much to do on this thing. It's always a big undertaking building a car, but we will get through it. And as always, folks, I'll bloody well see you on the next one. Cheers.